How do you stop yourself from getting back into that spiral?
Certain things are out of my control. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. There's nothing I can do to control that situation. There's probably something greater on the other side that I just don't know about yet.
Today on Really Mental, we welcome Symonne Harrison, an actress, dancer, YouTuber, entrepreneur, and we're going to be talking about how she has dealt with overthinking whilst being in the public eye.
Everything is like a stepping stone, and some stepping stones are really painful and they take some time to get over, but I wouldn't ever change anything. People are gonna hurt you. You don't have to forget what happened, but you can be able to forgive and make that closure for yourself, because sometimes you don't get the closure you want or needed.
I feel like sometimes life is really mental.
Dude, that's actually a really good name for a podcast.
So welcome to Really Mental. For those listening, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
So my name is Symonne Harrison. I'm a full-time content creator, actress, and I have a couple businesses of my own. I live here in Los Angeles, and I've been living here since I was 11, and now I'm turning 18 pretty soon. So I basically grew up completely online, and it's been a very fun experience. I definitely have some interesting stories, but I wouldn't change it for the world, and I think it's like the coolest job ever.
That's awesome. What would you say is like one of your favorite parts about growing up on the internet, and what has been one of the hardest things about it too?
Probably my favorite is having my followers grow up with me. I see like people my age watch my content. I mean, all ages, but I feel like I really resonate, of course, with people around my age group because we talk about the same things. We're going through the same things at the same time. So I feel like growing up together has always been really fun and just like evolving. And meeting fans in person is my favorite thing ever. I cry every single time. But one of the like interesting or like hard parts is that everything is online and there's kind of no way around it because people know so much about you. And even if you're going through something or something happened and you don't come out flat out and say it, they can tell just by like the way you are acting that day, like something's wrong.
How do you manage vulnerability with your audience online, but also protecting yourself with what you want to share and don't want to share?
I definitely like to be obviously myself and share my life with everyone, but it just comes with trial and error. Like sometimes I would share like a little bit too much and then be like, oh, I probably could have kept that to myself. And I think you kind of have to make that mistake first to be able to learn and then know your own boundaries with the way people react about certain things.
What was that process like for you, finding out, what you should share and, what not to share?
I learned the hard way by going through a public breakup. That's how I learned my lesson. And then after that, all my relationships have been kept offline for the most part. I mean, people see you out, they take photos, they get posted, word gets around, but you kind of have to learn the hard way.
How do you allow yourself to stop overthinking when it comes to those people and their intentions and how much you share with them on social media?
I never think it like quote unquote stops. I think there's definitely different aspects that like go into it, like especially with, making other friends with being friends with other people in the industry. You never know like their true intentions really, because it's such a competitive industry and everyone's trying to get to the top and whatever, which I feel like that's everyone's like end goal, but there's different ways to go about it. I personally just like being myself, and I have a very small group of friends and we all support each other 100%. There's no bad talking or talking behind each other's backs or like discipline people. Like it's genuinely probably the best genuine friend group I've had in a very, very, very long time. And that's just kind of something, again, you kind of just have to figure it out. But once you figure it out once, I feel like there's other things you could kind of look for. And even you can be a little bit hesitant. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just because it takes you a couple months to warm up to someone, it's kind of at the risk of like protecting yourself, I would say.
Yeah. What advice would you give people around finding the right friends that you can trust?
What I've realized, I'm kind of in this weird age right now where I'm still, like I'm about to be 18, but that makes me nowhere near close to being a full-on adult, you know? So it's like a weird stage where you're growing up and people are getting jobs and they're able to drive places and, you know, do more adult things, but some of people's like morals and stuff like that don't align when you get to a certain age. So I would say it's okay for friends to change. It's okay if someone you were super close with when you were 10 years old because you had nothing in the world to worry about, that now you're not as close with if you're not all on the same page about what you kind of want in life. And that's just part of life. I feel like if you're growing and stuff like that, if people are holding you back from doing that, you're never going to be at the place where you want to be or you could potentially be.
So I saw on your TikTok you posted, I think it was about like social like interactions, and I definitely relate to it, especially when I was 18, 19, of like even just like thinking through social interactions and what I could have like done differently. So how does overthinking show up for you? Is that the only way? Like, could you talk more on that?
Yes, so there's different aspects to this. I think when I have my super close friends and I'm in person, like I'm so chilling, I'm out having fun, whatever. If it's like a big event and there's a bunch of people I don't know, and maybe it's like a high profile setting, and you almost feel like you have to be on your like perfect game because like there's so many cameras and there's always people taking photos and whatever. Sometimes I feel like I would just kind of be more to myself because I don't know. I just would rather be more with myself than like a bunch of people I don't necessarily know. Just like don't know history behind people that you like see at events or whatever. And one time I was at this shoot and I got a photo taken with someone that I just met on the spot. Super cool, super nice. And then the next day, like something awful comes out about them. And I'm like, wait, that's who I was with yesterday? Like, it's so hard because you have no idea, you know, and you don't even know if half that stuff is true. But that's why I kind of just keep away. And also, I feel like interviews and stuff at events, I get so nervous because you never know the questions. And I'm like, this is going to get clipped. Like, I have to make sure, like, nothing can be taken out of context. I feel like that's the biggest part about social media is, like, making sure that what you post and what you say like can't be taken out of context and turned into something bad.
When you think of like those thoughts coming through, like even just like, oh, did I mess up and all this stuff, do you feel like there's any part of it for you which comes from like people pleasing?
I never want to try to purposely hurt someone's feelings or, you know, I don't think anyone does, but when there's so many like different people, there's so many aspects and you're out and whatever, it's really hard. I feel like that's also why I'm very much like in my own lane because I'm like, if I hang out with this person, like, what if that person is not good with one of my close friends, then that hurts their feelings. I feel like I'm so worried about like navigating everyone else's feelings and stuff because obviously I don't want to do anything on purpose, but it got to the point where I wasn't okay with myself and my own decisions like happening, that I kind of had to accept I might have to do something that won't make someone 100% happy, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to put yourself first at some point.
Who do you go to, or what do you go to when you have those moments of like feeling like you need to, you know, feeling like it's a really tough time, let's say?
Obviously, my family and my parents. I mean, I live with them. They're in the same house. We talk about everything. But I would definitely say, like, my really close friends. And I feel like there's a very select, I think there's maybe two. So I have, like, a really good friend group, but there's, like, two specific people in that group where I will, like, call them. And I know for, like, 100% they'll tell me, well, they will in general, but they'll literally tell me, Simone, you messed up, or like, you could have done that better, you, whatever. Like, they'll be like brutally honest with me, which I feel like sometimes everyone needs.
I think it's awesome you have those people that you can go to because sometimes, like, especially growing up, it's like tough to figure out who those are, or like, it doesn't feel like maybe, you know, you have those people. So that's awesome that you have that support network. When it comes to like, I guess, taking care of yourself mentally, do you have any things that you like to go and do that helped your mental health?
Yeah, yes and no. I feel like when I'm in my head or whatever, I like doing things other than what I normally do because it doesn't remind me of other things, if that makes sense. So sometimes I'll go on like a hike or go to the gym and just walk on the treadmill, or I'll go get a coffee, or I'll go play pickleball like with one of my friends. But yeah, I feel like going and doing other things that I won't normally do. And I think it depends on what I'm also overthinking. If I'm overthinking something about myself, maybe I'll take a self-care night and do like a face mask or try a new hairstyle or do a new makeup look, like just something kind of not necessarily totally out of the blue, but something that I know will get my mind off whatever I'm thinking.
Overthinking is something that a lot of people struggle with, and they don't really know how to deal with it. They can get into a spiral. They can keep on thinking. For you, how do you stop yourself from getting back into that spiral and actually sitting there, observing your thoughts, and then actioning them to realize they're not always the true reality?
I think if it's a situation with a person or something, and it's not like a bad situation, I'm just like thinking, and I'm like, oh, like, did I make you upset here or whatever? Just call them. I feel like that's the easiest thing to do because even if you're in a relationship and you're overthinking, like maybe they can find someone better, like da 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 da, just call them because they'll be there to reassure you and tell you, even if it's like quote unquote what you don't want to hear, like they're going to tell you the way it is and they're going to tell you things to make you not overthink if there's no reason to. And I feel like that's the easiest way for me to just snap out of it is hearing that one other person that I'm like thinking about tell me like it's okay, like what you're thinking is not true. Like I think kind of that person just to snap me back into it is probably like the best resource. Also,
I think it's also important for people to self-soothe. This is something that I've learned over the last like maybe 12 months is there's a lot of this stuff where we go out and we get reassurance or we get thoughts from other people, but it's how do we self-soothe and how do we deal with our own emotions and not allow others to necessarily affect the way that we feel at the end of the day because we are fully feeling secure in ourselves, right?
I think you definitely, I kind of got to that point where there was too many things going on and like I just need to figure it out with myself. And I think just sitting with yourself and doing things for yourself will teach you a lot about yourself and a lot about what you want in life and a lot about what you want right now. And I've kind of figured it out that way, honestly, this year as well. And I think I'm kind of in one of those things where certain things are out of my control. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. If it happens, it happens. There's nothing I can do to control that situation. I just have to let life take me in the direction that's going to take me in. And even if it doesn't feel like it's going in the direction I want it to, there's probably something greater out the other side that I just don't know about yet.
When it comes to like being in a relationship, friendship, what would you say your biggest fears are?
I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but my biggest fear in a relationship is not having the other person love me as much as I love them and having like a very, not even one-sided, but just putting more effort into something and then not having it reciprocated back 100% sometimes makes me get in my head.
Yeah, I mean, that's super fair. And I think that like it shows up differently for everyone. I know for me, like definitely like someone like leaving, that's like
Yeah.
a fear. And it's like interesting how these things drive certain behavior at like, certain moments around like, those fears show up.
I just wanted to ask, in relationships for you, Simone, what was a time that was hardest for you when you were dealing with, let's say, a breakup or a relationship?
I guess I've never really said this. Like people know, but I haven't really said it. But I would say basically a lot of my relationship traumas, my heart is beating so fast. Relationship traumas came from getting cheated on in my first relationship ever. And I've never said that publicly. So here we are. But my heart's like, but that's definitely, I think, what stemmed like having not like the other person leaving, not having the other person love you as much as you love them. And I feel like just accepting that And it was my first relationship. I had no idea what I was getting into. And we were together for a long time. So I feel like that kind of obviously started it. But then I feel like also just going from talking to the person every single day and being so open and doing all these fun things then to not ever speaking is like really difficult. I feel like that's probably the most hard part.
Thank you so much for sharing, Simone. I really appreciate that. And I think that you're really brave for sharing that. When you were going through that, how did you get through that time? Because that is for anyone at any age, that is such a like gut wrenching thing to go through.
Yeah, I would say at first when I found out, I didn't, it was on a very specific day, but I didn't want to believe it, kind of a thing, because you're like, wait, what? Like, that just doesn't make sense. So I feel like the first step for me was just like denial. And it's been like 2 years, so now I laugh about it, but it's really not funny. But, coping, it's fine. So I think at first you kind of don't believe it, because why would someone that loves you so much would do that? And then you kind of go through the stage of like acceptance and knowing that you're going to find someone who won't do that to you and that will love you for you and not even look in the direction of anyone else. So I feel like kind of just accepting that and knowing it's a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you, which is really hard to think about at the time because you kind of hate yourself, I guess I would say, because you're thinking about, oh, well, maybe it's because I look like this, or I could have done this, or you start basically beating yourself up over it, because clearly if you were everything they wanted, they wouldn't go with someone else. But they chose to be in the relationship with you. They knew what you were getting into. So like, it's not your fault at all. It's never your fault, no matter what you have done. It's not your fault for someone else's actions. And kind of just building self-love for yourself and moving on from that with the person you thought you were going to be with for a really long time. But just like moving on with that and growing. And I felt like in that time, I learned so much about myself and what I want and what I don't want. And even like looking back, I feel like on every relationship, it doesn't have to end in cheating or whatever. But I feel like you always look back afterwards from an outsider's perspective and be like, there was probably a lot of things I put up with that I shouldn't, or, oh, I didn't realize this in the time, but da-da-da-da-da. And I feel like afterwards you kind of realize that it maybe wasn't the best situation, but you can always move on from it and you know what you want next time.
How do you feel now with relationships and for yourself after those experiences?
Yeah, that's a very hard thing to do, I would say. For me, after that situation, it kind of got to the point where it was like, if someone just does something similar or whatever, I need some time away just to really like process it and work with myself through that, because immediately for the rest of my life, no matter how many years it's been, something triggers that, it's going to take me back to that place. And I think, it's kind of just like a self thing again. Like you need to really sit with yourself and think, is this what I want? Like, do I think this person is telling the truth or whatever? And sometimes you have to get hurt again to find out, and you're never not going to get hurt for the rest of your life, no matter how careful you are. And luckily, it hasn't been, again, with the relationships and mostly just friendships. But I feel like you can't just disregard everything that happened, because you kind of can pick up on certain signs or whatever. But luckily, I've not had that experience again. And hopefully no one will ever have that experience. But, I think it honestly just takes time with the person, and kind of slowly, again, getting acclimated. You don't want to jump in 100% right away, because you'll most likely get hurt.
And you may not have gone through this stage yet, or maybe you have, but I wanted to ask anyway, like when it comes to forgiving someone that has wronged you in that way or in any way, how do you go down that process?
Ironic that you asked this question, but for me personally, even friendships, relationships, family, like whatever, like people are going to hurt you, and you have to forgive. You don't have to forget what happened, but you can be able to forgive and make that closure for yourself, because sometimes you don't get the closure you want or needed. So you have forgiveness for the other person is closure within yourself. and then you can move on. Because if you don't forgive people, how do you expect other people to forgive you? Even if it's not to that extent, forgiveness happens every single day. And I think that's just a part of maturity and growing up and being a good person. The bad times will always be there, but you forgive each other for the bad times and you're happy and you're able to live on with the happy memories. I feel like that's what I learned from forgiveness.
Do you think after going through these experiences, when you reflect and you look back on that time, are you happy you went through this stuff? Or do you wish you never went through it?
I wouldn't say like I'm happy, but I wouldn't change anything, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think anyone should have to experience some of the things I experienced, but I'm glad, I guess, that it happened, because if that never happened, it wouldn't have led me to this and this and this. And I feel like everything is like a stepping stone, and some stepping stones are really painful and they take some time to get over, but I wouldn't ever change anything, because I feel like it makes you who you are today, and you have certain life experiences, and it just makes you wiser.
That's awesome. I think that's a really good way to look at it, because there are so many things that happen to us that help shape who we are, that may not be pleasant at the time, but really help expedite our growing process.
I would like to ask, when it comes to like cheating, infidelity, relationships, that type of stuff, having that happen so young, how has that influenced any future relationships you've had already since then?
So after I got out of my first relationship, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm never talking to anyone again. But a couple months later, I met this really sweet guy, and I was, again, very hesitant and whatever. And he was kind of hesitant into hopping into something, because he's never had because I kind of say, like, I don't want just like short-term relationships here or there, like whatever. And because I just don't understand the point. If you don't see yourself being with someone for the rest of your life, like, why are you in a relationship? That's just my take on that. But he was kind of hesitant because he's never been in like a relationship before, and he doesn't know what it's like and whatever. So we both were kind of like hesitant, but then I thought I was ready. And then he was like, okay, I'm ready for a relationship. It was very like short-lived, that like back and forth or whatever. But then I was like, commitment, being in a relationship, what if something happens again? So I ghost him for like 3 days. But so then I didn't ghost him. I was like, hey, like, I need a couple days to think about this. And then after that, I was like, I don't know if you still like me or not. But I took some time with myself, and I realized that my other past experience can't affect what I do in the future. I'm never going to be happy with someone. So let's go for it. And everything was great. And we had an amazing relationship, and there was so much love there and so much like fun times. And I feel like he truly like healed a part of me that most people couldn't. And I'll forever be grateful for that. And I feel like without that relationship, I wouldn't be in the mindset that I am today, with like, life happens, you have to just deal with it. Like, you can't control it to a certain extent or whatever. And that relationship was like amazing, and it was great. And we were together for a long time as well. And just recently in December, we ended up parting ways, but it was very mutual. It was just basically long distance, was kind of hard. And we have a lot going on in our personal lives. We still talk every single day, and we still call here and there and stuff. So we're like totally good. There's nothing bad happened at all. It was just kind of some things that were making our relationship harder than it should have been right now at this age.
Yeah, that's super mature. Made me think when you were talking about that, like, I'm glad you had that experience too.
Yeah.
When it comes to like looking for relationships or entering one for the first time, a new one, what do you think is the healthiest mindset to have when it comes to obviously being like there for them, but also continuing to do the work on yourself too, and being in the way?
I would definitely say, before you get into a relationship, make sure you're fully happy with yourself and what's around you. Because if you're still trying to, I mean, obviously everyone always works on themselves, but if you're still trying to figure out your own stuff while trying to make someone else happy, like, if you only have half of your glass filled and you're giving all your time and love to someone else, your glass is going to be empty, and that's not sustainable even for the other person. So I would definitely say that. And also just going into the mindset you don't want to go in with a negative mindset, but you also want to make sure with yourself, like, no matter how this ends up, if it ends up in marriage or if it ends up in a breakup, like, I'm going to be okay. And I think that's the best way to be in a relationship, is having that person being an added element into your life, not someone you solely rely on for happiness, because if that ever gets taken away from you, you're going to be in a really tough spot.
Throughout this last year and a bit, finding yourself change as a human, to kind of like talk about that with all these experiences, where have you changed when it comes to these things, and have you still caught yourself in a tough spot?
I think yes, I've changed like so much, like especially in the recent years. I didn't realize how much life gets difficult like so quick, and it's definitely not as difficult as it will be in the future. But like it was kind of just like here you go, and you kind of have to figure it out yourself. I feel like I've definitely changed in the aspect of like just honestly like maturing and growing up, and not that I wasn't before, because I've been in the business, like I've had my first business since I was 6 years old, and just having that mindset so young, like I always like hanging out with friends that are a couple years older than me. I just get along with them better than people my age. I think they're more mature and stuff like that. But I think just being able, when you're upset at someone for doing something to you or whatever, until you go through it yourself, you'll never understand. And now that I'm kind of at the age where I understand more, like certain situations, I'm like, yeah, it's messed up that they did that, but like I understand to the best of my ability what they could have been going through and being able to move on. So I just think like forgiveness has been like a big thing about maturing and changing and growing up, and just more like forgiveness and accepting, I feel like is the biggest changes, I guess, I've gone through, because I feel like it happens every single day versus like it would happen once in a blue moon or something. But now I just feel like to have really mature friendships or relationships, you need to be able to forgive, understand to the best of your ability, and then be able to move on and not hold it against that person.
And like you're someone that's had like a lot of success as well at a young age.
Thank you.
So it makes me want to know like what made you believe in yourself?
Honestly, my family, like 1,000%, because I feel like if you have people against you, it's a lot less likely that you're going to try and do something when you feel like everyone's against you. I would be going to dance rehearsal every night, but at the age of 6, when I feel like I had so many creative ideas and I was always trying to draw or do something or come up with something. Or growing up, my parents would always tell me, obviously I don't remember some of this stuff because I was little, but they'd always tell me like, if they gave me something or gave me a toy, or I was trying to learn how to do something, I'd be like, why does it have to be done this way? Why didn't the people like make it this way? Because it would be so much easier. And then they'd be like, wait, that's actually a good point. Like, why is she thinking of things like that? So I feel like I've always had like a very creative / analytical brain behind things, which is not helpful in school. I struggle. Like I have never gotten a B in my entire life, but I do struggle to focus in school because I'm definitely more creative brain sided. So I feel like my brain is always wandering somewhere else. But at the age of 6, do you know what Elf on the Shelf is?
No, but I'm 100% going to look it up now. Elf on the Shelf.
So basically it's just this toy, or it's not really a toy, but it's like this elf that comes around during Christmas time that will report back to Santa if you're being good that day or bad that day. And me at 6 years old, I was like, well, Christmas time means that you get presents. So of course people are going to be good for Santa if they know they're going to get presents. But I'm good all year round. So I want Santa to know that I'm good all year round and not just at Christmas time for some presents, because I think that's unfair. And then I was like, why isn't there something that watches you all year round so you are on your best behavior at all times and not just... So then I have this teddy bear named Barry that I've had since I was 3 years old. I take him everywhere. He's laying in my bed right now. No one's really seen him. It's a very personal item to me. But I was like, why don't we just make like a bear that does the same thing? And my parents were like, well, what would it sit on? And I'm like, a chair? Like, I don't know. Like, let's figure it out. So fast forward, like less than a year later, I had my first product called Bear on the Chair. And we made prototypes and everything using Build-A-Bear boxes and my little stuffed animal. And at the age of 7, so a year later, I got my first patent on the product. And I've been doing interviews and like working in stores. On my Christmas break for school, I would go work at the stores where my bear sold at and go sell it to people. Like, that was my type of fun when I was 7 years old, is going to sell my product. I did news interviews. Like, it was so much fun. I feel like I was not even living, doing all that kind of stuff. I had the best time. But again, none of that, I was 6 years old. None of that stuff couldn't happen if I didn't have like amazing parents and amazing grandparents and aunts and cousins and everything that believed in me, because they're the people that had to make it happen. I can say it all I want, but they literally had to do all the research and find all the resources for that to happen because I was 6 years old. So I feel like that kind of motivated me once I did that and started selling them. They were in stores and I was like, wait, like if this works, like if I try something else, maybe it'll work. So then that's how I kind of got on my business role. And certain things you try, they don't work, and you know what you could have done better, what people like, what they don't like, what changes you can make, and it'll either do really good or maybe just try again with something else. Like, again, trial and error is such a big part about growing up and relationships, even in business, because you never know what it's going to do unless you actually try to do it. So definitely that motivation stems from that whole experience.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I want to ask the last question, which was, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Ooh, this is a good one. Oh my gosh. Advice that I would give to my younger self. Probably just keep doing what you're doing because it worked out for you, and stop worrying about what other people say and stuff like that. And you're so beautiful, even if you don't feel like it on some days. And just keep being a good, genuine person. And even if you get hurt growing up, that it's going to pay off in the long run. And there's not many people like that. And it's really hard to find. So I think honestly, just staying true to myself and just being me is the best advice I can give, because people will either love you or they won't love you. And that's their opinion. But I've been able to find a really good group that loves you for who you are and not just because your job or anything like that.
That's awesome. I love that.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for asking me to come on the podcast. That's my first podcast interview, so I'm so excited.
Yeah, it was so fun. Thank you.
So the episode was quite interesting. My biggest takeaway was that you need to find a group of people that love you for you. And not everyone will, and that's okay. But the people that love you for you will really be there for you and recognize the importance and individuality of you and embrace it. So I think it's so important to have a surround system and have a support group of people that really love you for who you are as an individual and appreciate you for that. And I think I took that away from today, and I think it's so important to have that. And I want everyone else to take that away from today's conversation and really implement that into their life. Look at your friends, look at your family, look at everyone in your life and ask them, do they love you for the individuality that you offer and the way that you approach life? Yeah, so with that, hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to share it with a friend and let us know what you think. If you could please support by following us at Really Mental Media and liking the podcast 5 stars, it would go a long way for us to create content like this for you guys every week. We'll see you next week with an amazing episode.